You might have noticed on the top of your order of service for today a very familiar teaching from the Christian tradition, which is attributed to Jesus. Blessed are those who make peace, for they shall be called the children of God. Now, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because whether it's blessed are those who make peace or blessed are the peacemakers, it doesn't say blessed are those who sit down and enjoy quite a lot of peace. It definitely says making peace, creating peace, being an instrument of peace, allowing peace to come to life through us. They shall be called the children of God. That is, they will know their divine inheritance. They will know their spiritual strengths. They will know that they belong to a world that is eternal as well as to this world, and that we owe something to that knowledge. What we owe to that knowledge is to express it, to live it, to embody it, and not to say, oh, that must be for other people who are so much more advanced than I am. It also means that we get over it when we fall down and we build ourselves up again into a state of living in peace. The prayer that came to me very strongly when I thought also of the prayer of St. Francis, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Because what other instruments would there be except us? If it's not us, who will it be? You know, this is like the orchestra of the whole human family. We can play our lives in greater or lesser harmony. And it doesn't mean that we all play the same note. Of course not. And it doesn't mean that there won't sometimes be discords. But how those discords are resolved depends upon us. So I could pray, for example, let me be powerful wherever peace is absent. Let me recognize my power to restore peace where peace is absent. First and foremost in my own heart. Let me understand that peace is an active, willed state of mind, that our will has to come into play here because we make countless choices that are more or less peaceful. So there's nothing passive about this, and very often there's nothing awfully easy about it either. So please don't confuse being a more peaceful person with being weakened. On the contrary, it takes a great deal of strength to be a more peaceful person, and it builds strength as we make those efforts. It requires consciousness and conscience. And it also requires an awareness that our lives matter, and so do other people's. So far from this being an easy option, it's a thrilling option. It's a thrilling option because it means that we can not only come into the center of our own lives, but we can also discover what life is really for. We can create meaning in our daily existence. We do that because in living more peacefully, in living more cooperatively, in living more generously, in living more harmoniously, in living more joyfully, we express our concern for other people and we leave behind the prison of self-involvement. We also enter a life that is truly inclusive, and that means a great deal to us in this interfaith community. Our guiding principles, our guiding values here are generosity of heart and unconditional inclusion. None of us belongs here more than the other one. And that's a very, very big experience for many of us who have been in situations where some are most definitely more included than others. And there cannot be peace until we can offer all aspects of ourselves a welcome. And there cannot be peace until we say welcome to our whole human family, whether or not we agree with everybody's views. Thinking about this, I thought, for most of us, there are three primary obstacles to peace in our hearts. The first is an absence of trust about who we are and what we are capable of being. And that's a theme I've talked to you about over and over again. Trusting the gift of life that is yours. The second obstacle, I think, is fear and all its manifestations, but particularly anxiety and worry. We live in a world where anxiety and worry is rampant, where there is so much agitation and often around really trivial matters. So in bringing peace to our hearts, we can also become much more discerning as to what really should be of great concern to us and what can be of less concern. And the third obstacle, and it is a very powerful one, is rage, resentment, bitterness, that life is not as we believe it ought to be. This not only breaks hearts, it disrupts peace of mind and peace of heart. And very often in the face of that obstacle, people will act to further diminish and demolish peace, rather than, as in that beautiful Buddhist teaching that Jolyon read, where there is hatred, bring love. But of course there has to be good news, and the good news is that all of those obstacles can be transformed. Transforming is the key here, not demolishing, not loathing ourselves for those very human experiences, not pretending that, they happen to other people but not to us, but transforming them through discernment, through compassion, and through gentleness. And the prayer of serenity that is so familiar to so many of you is really helpful here. God, give us the grace, that is, the inner well-being, to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, not to hit our heads against a brick wall that is utterly indifferent to the pain that we will cause ourselves. Courage to change the things that can be changed. And many things can be changed, not least in our attitude towards them. And the wisdom to know the difference. And I found a wonderful prayer from the 8th century from Shantideva. How lovely this is. If there's something that can be done when trouble strikes, what reason is there for dejection? If you can do something about it, no need to be dejected. And if there is nothing that can be done for it, what purpose is there in being downcast? So these questions, these challenges have belonged to our human family throughout our recorded history, and probably long before. We have longed for peace in our hearts, and we have had to remind each other gently and lovingly and persistently, and sometimes quite strongly, what will diminish our peace and what will help us to cultivate it. In my own experience, I notice again and again and again how I let habits of mind disrupt my peace of heart. That I have to draw from my heart a depth of knowledge that transcends what my mind thinks it knows. I have to align my mind and my heart and draw from a far deeper place than book learning or rational thought can take me. I need to still myself in the presence of the sacred. I need to still myself in the presence of Spirit in order to restore peace to my heart. And some of us might call that prayer, and some of us might call it meditation, and some of us might just call it the call back home to a state of perfection and well-being. Whatever our obstacles are to peace, we don't subdue them by ignoring them. We align ourselves with them peacefully and hopefully and transform them. In the same way that when we recognize our fears, when we recognize our worries, we ask ourselves, what's needed here? And I found a most extraordinary, most empowering and powerful story to share with you. This story comes from one of the great peacemakers of the 20th century, Dr. Martin Luther King. And I've included it, as you can see, in Seeking the Sacred. In this recollection, Dr. King has described himself as being in a state of profound exhaustion. And I think we can only imagine what that must have meant to a person who not only carried hope in his heart, but for so many, many hundreds of thousands of people embodied hope. But there he was, in his human moment of utter depletion. And then he takes up his own story. I determined to take my problem to God, he writes. My head in my hands, I bowed over the kitchen table and I prayed aloud. The words I spoke to God that midnight are still vivid in my memory. I am here taking a stand for what I believe is right, but I am afraid. I am at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I think even without being Martin Luther King and without having his responsibilities, we've had those moments. Sometimes we call them the dark night of the soul. So back to Martin Luther King again. At that moment, I experienced the presence of the divine as I have never before experienced him. It seemed as though I could hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, stand up for truth. Stand up for righteousness. God will be at your side forever. 3 nights later, our house was bombed. Strangely enough, I accepted that bombing calmly. My experience with God had given me a new strength and a new trust. I knew now that God is able to give us the resources to face the storms and problems of life. Let this affirmation be our ringing cry. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds, and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember there is a great benign power in the universe whose name is God, and he can make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. This is our hope for becoming better people. This is our mandate for seeking a better world. We don't make a better world. without becoming first a better people. And we don't become a better people without first accepting the challenge, the invitation, the direction, the guidance, the opportunity to discover and to embody in our own lives, in our own conduct, in our own switch from resentment to good humour, from criticism to encouragement, from complaint to gratitude, peace in our own hearts. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Blessed be.